Well, hello, friends. It's so nice to see everyone coming in. I love watching that participant number rise and rise. We're so glad that you could join us tonight. We'll get started here in just a few moments. And friends, do know that this is being recorded, so you're anonymous, which is good. But just so you know, there's going to be this presentation will be available on the APS YouTube channel as well as on stamps.org. And I'm just watching the numbers, friends. All righty, Dan. All right, friends. Well, welcome aboard. Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to Stamp Chat. I'm Heidi Rhodes. Tonight's guest joins us from Vancouver, Canada. Ed Kroft is currently an international level judge and president of the Royal Philatelic Society of Canada. Ed lives in Vancouver, Canada, and has collected stamps for over 55 years. He's the past president of the Society of Israel Philatelists, also known as SIP, and has been actively involved with that society for many years. Ed has written many articles for various philatelic publications relating to philately and the Holy Land, and has successfully exhibited at the regional, national, and international levels. In 2012, Ed was the winner of the Regal Award of the SIP for outstanding contributions to Holy Land philately. Ed was also the 2013 Geldert Medal awarded by the RPSC and the 2017 winner of the Jennings Award from the American Association of Philatelic Exhibitors, AAPE. In 2020, Ed was the recipient of the Dickstein Award of the SIP for outstanding philatelic writing and research. Ed is a member of many societies, including the APS, the AAPE, of course, the Royal Philatelic Society of Canada, SIP, Postal History Society, the Postal History Society of Canada, the Philatelic Specialist Society of Canada, BNAPS, ONEPS, the Collectors Club of New York, and the Holy Land Philatelic Society. His interests include the postal history of the Holy Land, the Middle East, Canada, and era philately. Stamp Chat is a production of the American Philatelic Society. One of the many benefits of becoming an APS member is your subscription to the American Philatelist. The AP is the oldest continuously published philatelic journal in the world, written by members for members. This May, look for the joint issue of the American Philatelist and the Canadian Philatelist, the publication of the Royal Philatelic Society of Canada. Members from the RPSC and the APS contribute articles featuring stamps, postal history, and you guessed it, hockey. If you have a hockey fan in your life, be sure to save the date, May 2021. It's hockey all month. Now, before we begin, friends, we have a few housekeeping items to address. Today's session is a webinar, and as such, all audio and video are muted and turned off respectively throughout the presentation. However, feel free to use that chat box. But if you do have questions for Mr. Kroft, we appreciate if you would use the Q&A box. This session is being recorded and it will be available on stamps.org as well as on the APS YouTube channel. And with that, our feature presentation, Some Uncommon Destinations from Mail Sent from Palestine, December 1917 till May 1948. Thank you so much, Ed. Thank you for joining us tonight.
Thanks very much, Heidi. Hi, everyone, and thanks for coming to this webinar. As Heidi mentioned, I'm going to be taking you on a trip around the world today. We're going to be looking at various countries to which mail was sent from Palestine during the British occupation, roughly from November, December 1917 through May 1948. And with that, I'm going to turn to the presentation itself. Now, mail from Palestine was sent to many places during the period between 1917 and 1948. And I find this a fun area to collect because there's a significant challenge factor. It's really hard to find mail sent to very unusual destinations. It will instruct in postal history, it will instruct in geography, and in philatelic knowledge. You will learn a lot about history in this presentation, and I hope you will enjoy the various geographical locations to which the mail was sent. Now, the key driver in this presentation is the destination to which mail was sent. And I've grouped mail according to different continents. So you will see us go through the Middle East, North America, Central America, South America, Africa, Asia, Oceania, and you hopefully will find covers that will be of interest, even if you collect countries other than Palestine. Now, the mail that's being shown was sent not just by air, but also by surface, by land or by water. I will try to explain rates given the time that we have pertaining to the various covers that I'm showing. But one of the features of the presentation that I want to advert you to is to think about how all this mail actually survived over the years, particularly because it went to such exotic countries. Now, these uncommon destinations may have been sovereign states in and of themselves. They may have been colonies of other countries. They may have been protectorates, territories, possessions of sovereign states. The reason why I'm interested in that, because I have to reflect on how the mail actually got to some of these uncommon destinations and whether or not there was some agreement or some treaty between Britain, the United Kingdom, and representing Palestine, and the countries to which the mail was sent. Now, for those of you who aren't familiar with this, you should be aware that Palestine, during the period under review, was under military and ultimately civilian administration by the British. There was occupation by the Egyptian Expeditionary Force during the end of or near the end of World War I. After World War I, there was an occupied enemy territory administration, and ultimately the League of Nations awarded a mandate to Britain, to the United Kingdom, to look after this territory involving Palestine. Now, as I mentioned, the postal relations that you are going to see in this presentation were effectively between the United Kingdom and the postal authorities who were administering the mail in these uncommon destinations. All the sovereign states that I'm going to refer to in this presentation were members of the Universal Postal Union at the time that the mail shown was sent. Now, why did I choose the word uncommon in this presentation? Why didn't I choose the word exotic, rare, scarce, unique, unusual, or as one of my colleagues said, why don't you just call it weird mail sent from Palestine? And I've considered a destination to be uncommon for purposes of this presentation because of such factors as geography, size of the population, and frequency with which mail was sent to that particular location at a particular point in time. So throughout this presentation, I hope you will consider my parameters. And in particular, I consider that a destination is uncommon if a cover was sent to a location where mail was seldom sent throughout the period, or mail is uncommon, in other words, that a cover is one to which mail was seldom sent from Palestine by surface or by airmail at some points in time during the relevant period. Now, every presentation I do, I give credit to those who deserve it for one reason or another. And I'd like to give credit in this presentation to various people and to various sources that I looked at for purposes of putting the presentation together. In particular, I'd like to thank Ed Rosen, Jakob Zachor, Mike Bass, Joel Slutsky, and others who either contributed knowledge, some covers to me, or made information available to me for purposes of putting this presentation together. And I'd like to dedicate this presentation to the memory of Dr. Les Bard, who has passed. And Les was an extraordinary collector of airmail in the Palestine era, and he wrote many articles on aerophilately in the Holy Land space, and we're very grateful to him, all of us, for all the contributions he made to our hobby. And with that, let me turn to what you've really come for, which is to see covers and maps relating to covers and all sorts of information that will continue to make you excited about what you collect. So the first area I'm going to deal with is the Middle East. And what I should say at the outset is that when I talk about different areas, you might say, well, geez, that area really contains this particular country and not that particular country. So if you disagree perhaps with the designations that I might put on covers for certain areas, please feel free to say so. However, I've done the best I can based on various sources to try to characterize or categorize different things. So first, I'd like in the Middle East to turn to Aden, which was a British Crown colony, and it's in the south of Yemen. And I try to use maps throughout this presentation because notwithstanding that when I was a kid, I loved to collect stamps and I'd love to learn about different countries and the stamps of different countries, as I'm sure all of you like to do. Nevertheless, it's a great refresher to look at maps for purposes of making sure you know exactly what place mail was actually being sent to. So the first place I'm talking about is Aden. And here's a cover from Jerusalem to Camp Aden. There were British troops there, and this is dated 1937. It's franked with 15 mils of Palestine stamps, and it's back-stamped, as you see in the bottom corner, with the Aden Camp back stamp. Now, just at the outset, now that we're actually looking at covers, I should mention to you that for purposes of this presentation, you should be aware that Palestine had stamps in different periods. So at first, there were stamps that were called the blues that were issued in 1918. And then after that, there were stamps called typographical stamps that were issued in 1920, overprinted in sorry about that. The typograph stamps were issued in 1918. They were overprinted in 1920 with the word Palestine in different languages, English, Arabic, and Hebrew. In 1927, there were pictorial stamps that were issued. And the stamps that you see here on this cover from Aden are pictorial stamps. And I will refer to the different types of stamps, the blues or the typograph stamps or the pictorial stamps throughout this presentation. The next cover is from Palestine to Aden, and it's an airmail cover. So before you saw some surface mail that went at that particular point in time, here's an airmail cover, and you say to yourself, why is the postage actually 8+2, which is 10 mils, and that is the denomination of the currency that was used in Palestine at the time, mils. And the reason is because this was a cover that was sent under the auspices of what was called the all airmail or all up rate. So there was actually a uniform airmail rate sent from Palestine to, or used from Palestine to different places in the British Empire. The next place we'll go to is Bahrain. And here's a world view of where Bahrain is on your map. And you'll see it's near the Arabian Peninsula. And here's a cover that is franked with 25 mils of stamps from Palestine. These are pictorials once again, going from Haifa to Bahrain Island, namely to the place called Awali. And you'll see this was a cover that was sent in 1940. You'll see over to the left of the cover, there is a censorship opening of the cover. It was restapled once the cover was opened. So that is an example. You'll see the censorship marking. You'll see the airmail etiquette down in the corner. The next place I want to take us to is Iraq, also known as Mesopotamia, which was at the time under the administration of the United Kingdom. Now, some of you might say, well, wasn't Iraq pretty close to Palestine and therefore was a fairly common destination for mail during the period? However, the reason I'm showing this cover is because at the time that it was sent, namely in 1923, it was sent by airmail. And you'll see notations in a box, a printed box, and also by hand that referred to the fact that the cover was sent by air. And what's so interesting about this is that the Royal Air Force flew mail across the desert from Palestine to Iraq. And there was also an additional surcharge that was placed on the cover in terms of the postage. These stamps that you see here are the typograph stamps that I referred to earlier, and they have the overprints of Palestine, for example. There's the Arabic at the top, the English in the middle, and the Hebrew at the bottom. So what's unusual or uncommon about this cover at this period of time, this was mail going to Iraq by air. Now, the next place we're going to is Lebanon, or actually, are we really going to Syria? Because if we look at this cover, it's addressed to Beirut, Syria. And some of you will go, hold on, isn't Beirut in Lebanon? How is it in Syria? Well, there's various reasons we could speculate about this. I think it's pretty clear, or actually not so clear, from the back stamp on the back of the cover, that it actually went to Beirut. And Beirut was, at the time, in Lebanon. It was the capital of Lebanon under the French mandate from the League of Nations. Lebanon became independent in 1943. And in 1933, when this cover was sent, it was really sent to Lebanon. Now, why was possibly Syria mentioned? Because at an earlier point in time, this entire area was also known as Greater Syria, and that might have been some residual knowledge that the sender had in the circumstances, just speculating. Now, you will see on the cover, there is postage that is 16 mils. The rate was actually 15. And the question is, what types of stamps are these? These are examples of the pictorial stamps that I referred to before. And I spoke about Lebanon. Here's an example of a cover going to Lebanon after its independence from Bethlehem, a registered cover. These kinds of covers are beautiful covers because they have all sorts of markings on them, whether or not the markings result from the fact that the person couldn't be found, all sorts of transit markings, all sorts of registration markings, and the fact that the person wasn't found, so the cover was returned to sender in the circumstances. So a very beautiful postal history cover, and this is actually going to Lebanon. Some of you might think to yourselves, well, aren't places in the Middle East fairly common because they're close to Palestine? But frankly, there are many places where mail might not have been sent on a common basis, or at least they're not necessarily readily found. For example, here's a cover to Saudi Arabia in 1947, a registered cover out of El Ramleh. The addressee of the cover had left. That's why you see the sticker that was placed on the cover indicating that the person had left. And this was, once again, a registered cover sent by airmail from Palestine in 1947, not necessarily a common destination. Let's move out of the Middle East and go to North America at this point and see what we'll find. And some of you looking at this picture might say, oh, I see Hawaii over on the left side of the map. You know, since when is that part of North America? Well, at least one map that I found associated Hawaii with North America. So for purposes of my presentation, that's what I'm going to follow. And in that regard, when I first look at North America, I'm looking at Alaska. Now, why would I be showing mail to Alaska? Well, at the time that Palestine existed under British occupation, Alaska was a U.S. territory. So here's a 1938 postcard going from Jerusalem to Gambell, Alaska, and it's going by surface mail. What's interesting to me is it's difficult to find mail going from Palestine to Alaska, not necessarily a common destination in and of itself. The next cover I'm showing is from Palestine to Canada. Now, there was a fair bit of mail going from Palestine to Canada, beginning in the late 1920s, early 1930s, all the way to 1948. However, what's special about this cover is that the cover was sent during World War I. It was sent on July 4th, 1918. And you'll see the stamp on the cover is an example of one of the blues, the first stamps of Palestine that I referred to. But again, what is special about the cover is at the time, Canada was at war together with Britain and other countries against certain powers such as Germany and the Ottoman Empire, for example. And mail did not go from Canada to Palestine, or alternatively from Palestine to Canada while it was under the occupation of the Ottoman Empire. However, in late 1917 through the middle of 1918 and beyond, the British started capturing through the Egyptian Expeditionary Force parts of Palestine. And as soon as the British occupied parts of Palestine, then mail service became available. So this is an example of a cover, the only one reported that I'm aware of, that went from Palestine to Canada once the British occupation began, and after the cities of Jaffa and Jerusalem, for example, were occupied by the Egyptian Expeditionary Force. You will see on this cover, there's an extraordinary back stamp of the city of Prince Rupert, which is way in the northwest of Canada, fairly close to Alaska. So how this cover ever got there, how it survived, and how it managed to make its way from Palestine all the way up to northwestern Canada is, frankly, quite extraordinary. The next place we're going to go is Hawaii, when it was a U.S. possession. And this is a cover that's going from Haifa to Maui in 1921. And the letter, which is franked with 13 mils, or 1 piastra and 3 milliems, making 13, that cover is to Mrs. Dorset in Maui, Hawaiian Islands. Not very much of an address. And you will see the typographical stamps that are overprinted Palestine in Hebrew at the bottom, Arabic at the top, English in the middle. And the overprints that occurred in 1920 and beyond, when the typograph stamps were used, or the typographical stamps were used, they might be in different serifs, they might be different printing. So Palestine collectors referred to some of these overprints as London 1 or London 2 or Jerusalem 1 or Jerusalem 2, only because those are the places where the overprints were administered on the stamps. However, for our purposes in this presentation, the extraordinary thing is we've got stamps in an early period of time on a cover going to the Hawaiian Islands when it was a U.S. possession. The next piece is, again, a piece going from Hawaii to, from Jerusalem to Hawaii in November of 1935. And there's actually a receiving cancel in Hawaii, one that I hadn't seen previously. Now, this is a pictorial stamp that you see on the cover, and it pays the postcard rate. But to the extent that I'm aware of, it's the only postcard known to exist from Palestine to Hawaii during the British Mandate period with a receiving cancel. The next piece, once again, is a Hawaiian piece, and it's from Jerusalem to the territory of Hawaii to Honolulu. It went via the United States. It was censored. And look at the dates. It's July 17th, 1941, so close to Pearl Harbor, not quite all the way to December of 1941. And these are pictorial stamps that are paying the 15 mil foreign surface rate to Hawaii. In North America, the next piece I'm looking at is Mexico, which was a sovereign state in and of itself. Here's a beautiful postal history piece. The contents were written in the Arabic language. It's a registered cover out of Bethlehem. The postage is significant. There's 150 mils at the time, plus 15 mils registration rate. So that's why the postage total is 165. And this took a long time to to actually get to Mexico. 34 days transit. On the back of the cover, there are various transit markings. Once again, a very nice postal history cover that at its right also shows censorship tape. Now we're going to move to Europe, out of North America. And here's a map of Europe. Some of you might say, are some of those countries in Europe or are they not? We're not going to debate that at this point. I'm going to follow some of the rigors of the map in order to try to provide you with information and covers that you'll enjoy. The first one I'm going to show you is from Palestine to the Aegean Islands, which was a Greek possession. A cover in 1937 from Haifa to Rhodes, and it arrived. There's the backstab on the cover. You may recognize the addressee. Mr. Bayer was a dealer. He sent the cover, or it was sent to him, Posta Restante in Rhodes, Aegean Islands, and you'll see the back stamp of Bayer on the cover. We refer to these as Bayer covers. However, you know, the fact that we have the transit of this cover, the receipt of this cover, is an excellent example of postal history, even though you might think it derives of philatelic origins. A cover from Palestine to Albania, triple weight registered. Here are typograph stamps that are overprinted on the cover. They're June 1927. They were used just before the advent of the pictorial stamps in 1927. And it sent registered mail from Tiberias. You'll see it was sent by a stamp dealer from Tiberias, but various transit markings on the back. Goes through the Bari railway station in Italy and lands in Albania. So, and a very nice postal history cover. Danzig, or as the cover says, Danzig Freistaat. Danzig was a free state. In today's terms, it's known as Gdansk in Poland. And mail was sent from Palestine with a 50 mil rate plus 13 registration. It went by Lot Airlines to Danzig, which isn't surprising given the fact that the city is currently in Poland, but close to Poland, but it stood as a free state at the time. Palestine to Estonia. Estonia, one of the Baltic states. This is a postcard, May 1938. The 8 mil stamps, 5 and 3, are pictorial stamps on the postcard. The rate is the correct rate for sending a postcard out of Palestine at the time. What's interesting to me and why I put it in is Estonia was a place which the Nazis considered Judenfrei, in other words, free of Jews in 1940, 1941. So finding mail going to Estonia from Palestine is always something that's relatively difficult as you get closer to 1940, 1941 and past. And here's an example of a parcel card, registered, insured, beautiful parcel card going to Tallinn, Estonia, with very heavy postage. It's insured, it's got a declared value on it. Always nice to see on these parcel cards. On the back of the parcel card, you'll see a receiving cancel in Tallinn and transit through the parcel post area in Palestine, from which in Tel Aviv, it was one parcel that was actually sent in these circumstances. The parcel weighed 9 kilograms and 755 grams. That's why you have the significant amount of postage that's placed actually on the cover. Palestine to Finland. Here's a cover, 5 times weight, registered out of the city of Petah Tikva in Palestine, going to Finland, 1933. So I put this in because it was a heavyweight cover, registered, and goes at a fairly early point in time by airmail to Finland. Palestine to Greece. And Greece was fairly close to Palestine. There was mail that went from Palestine to Greece. Why would I consider this uncommon necessarily? Well, this is going to the Greek island of Chios. in Greece, and it was going to someone who was a religious figure on the island of Chios. Unfortunately, it was returned to sender. There was no service. We have Palestine pictorial stamps on the cover, or actually on the postcard, and the postage that was actually applied was in excess of what the postcard rate was at the time, really almost sent as a letter. But what's so interesting about this is that is the date on the cover or on the postcard. It's November 1944, and you may know that the Nazi occupation in Greece ended on October the 12th, 1944, with the entry of the British at the time, and there was the Greek Civil War that started right after. So mail sent from Palestine to Greece may well have been turned back. This is an example of it, and I have seen, and I have mail going in December of 1944 from Palestine to Athens that actually was received and was not returned to sender. The other thing that's interesting to note, that what was attached to this card was this note that it said, letters are more likely to pass the censor expeditiously if they are short and clearly written. And what's very interesting, and I didn't have room for it necessarily on this slide, the note on the back is very short. So I thought it was very interesting that whoever the postal clerk involved was attached this note to the postcard, given how short the back of the cover was, or the back of the postcard was. Speaking of Greece, an example of transit after the war, considerable postage. This is from Palestine to Piraeus, registered cover with many, many beautiful transit marks on the back of the cover. 1946, 7 times weight. Palestine to Iceland, not exactly a destination you would think a lot of mail would travel from Palestine. It wasn't a common destination to which mail would go, but this is a postcard sent from Tiberias to Iceland. You will see a typograph stamp that's overprinted, coming with from Tiberias with a postmark out of Tiberias in 1925. The postcard was franked with only 3 mils, which paid the printed matter rate rather than the postcard rate. And once it got to Iceland, it was actually forwarded to or readdressed to Denmark in the circumstances. Another cover from Palestine to Iceland, not franked with typograph stamps, but franked with pictorial stamps. And this went from Tel Aviv to Reykjavik in February of 1947. The rate appeared to be deficient, but another stamp was added in order to satisfy the airmail rate of 60 mils. Palestine to Ireland. Why is it noteworthy for me? It goes to the Irish Free State. It goes to Dublin. It transits England. You see registration through London on the back, transit marks through Kantara, Haifa, and Sarafan, beautiful typograph stamps on the front of the cover that are overprinted. And when we go to the next cover, which again is from Palestine to Ireland through to the Irish Free State, it goes to Dublin, airmail this time around. And we've got the transit marks on the back through Haifa after it was being sent from Jerusalem. But the thing to note, the first cover had typograph stamps. The second cover had pictorial stamps. But the Irish Free State ended on December 29th, 1937. So the reason I put these covers in is because they are really during the period of the Irish Free State, between 1922 and 1937, as opposed to post-1937. Next, Palestine to the Isle of Man. And for those of you who say, where is the Isle of Man? Here it is on the map of Europe. And here's a cover going to the Isle of Man from Palestine. And a very interesting historical cover. It's going to the Married Aliens Internment Camp located in the Isle of Man. The letter was written in German. It was opened by the censors at the time. It was sent by registration. It was sent with registration by airmail with the appropriate censor markings and censor tape on both sides of the cover with different censorship tape by different jurisdiction, by different censors at the time. Now we go Palestine to the Isle of Wight. And some of you will know that the Isle of Wight was the scene of a very famous rock concert in and about 1970. Otherwise, here's a postcard from 1918 to the Isle of Wight. It is a typograph stamp, and you'll notice that the typograph stamp first issued in 1918 was not overprinted. It was only overprinted in 1920 following the League of Nations Mandate award to Britain, France, you know, in certain circumstances. So we have a postmark from the Army Post Office in October 1918, and it's from Army Post Office GM1, pays the 4 mil postcard rate. Then here's a airmail letter to the Isle of Wight with 35 mils going through England. In these circumstances, it's Jerusalem to Ryde in the Isle of Wight, triple weight airmail. So we've got a typograph stamp, we've got pictorial stamps, we've got surface mail on a postcard, and we've got airmail going to the Isle of Wight. I'm not sure how much mail was going from Palestine to the Isle of Wight in any period during these 30-odd years under review in this presentation. Next, one of my favorite covers. This is a 1936 registered cover going from Palestine by airmail, by KLM, from Jaffa to a person named Benito Mussolini, Sua Altezza, His Highness Benito Mussolini in Rome. And what's interesting is the person who sent the cover appears to be Khalil Janho. And Khalil Janho, by my research, worked with the Mufti of Jerusalem, who was trying to throw his lot in with the Italians and the Nazis for purposes of trying to disrupt the British government at the time. So this is a 1936 cover. You'll see that it says it's privato, it's private. There are various postmarks that are transit postmarks. It went through Hungary, this cover, in order to ultimately get to Italy. Palestine to one of the smallest places in the world, Liechtenstein, which was a sovereign state in 1947, which is when this cover was sent. You'll see all the colorful pictorial postage sent by airmail with registration to Vaduz, 60 mil rate, plus 15 for registration. Next, Palestine to Luxembourg, and 1946, not a common destination to which mail was typically sent from Palestine. And you will see the two bars through the airmail etiquette indicating that the cover went by air only as far as London and then went by surface after it left London. Palestine to Malta, and notwithstanding that this cover is on His Majesty's service, which would typically indicate that a cover should be sent without postage, in this case, there were pictorial stamps affixed, and it was an airmail cover. But what I want to draw your attention to is that the cover was sent to the Honorable Sir Harry C. Luke, Lieutenant Governor's Office, Malta. And you will see Harry Luke's name on 2 or 3 covers in this presentation. And who was Harry Luke? He was an official in the British Colonial Office. He served in Barbados, Cyprus, Transcaucasia, Sierra Leone, Palestine, Malta, British Western Pacific Territories, and Fiji. And you will see him come up on different covers in this presentation. And I would say it was a fluke that I found out anything about Luke. That's how I would put it in this presentation. Palestine to another one of the smallest places in the world, Monaco. And here is an early airmail cover sent from Palestine through France, through Paris, frankly, to Monaco, might have gone by, went likely by surface from Paris or somewhere in France to Monaco. You see the pictorial stamps that are located on the cover in this particular case. Palestine to Northern Ireland, part of the United Kingdom. And this is 60 mil airmail rate, 1941 in July. The sender of the cover was in Gaza, Palestine. The cover, because it was wartime, was opened by the censors, and it arrived in Northern Ireland in August of 1941. A second example of a cover to Northern Ireland, again, not a common destination, 1942 cover, the rate changed from 60 to 65. It was sent, this is a registered cover, the other one was not. And this was sent by someone who was in police headquarters in Haifa, sent to Belfast in Northern Ireland. Palestine to Norway. This is a postcard sent by airmail, always something fun to find, with pictorial stamps on it, paying the airmail postcard rate. And it went to Bergen, Norway, and then it was redirected over to Hamburg, Germany. Palestine to Portugal. Here's a postcard with the 8 mil foreign postcard appropriate postage sent to Lisbon in Portugal from the city of Jericho in 1927. We saw typograph stamps on this postcard. Now we see pictorial stamps on this overweight airmail cover sent from Holon, the city of Holon in Palestine, sent by registered mail to Lisbon. It's an overweight cover. It's 14 times weight, so it had heavier material within it. Palestine to Spain, 13 mil foreign surface mail rate. It's not an airmail cover, sent from Palestine to Madrid. We actually have a receiving mark on the back. I put this into the presentation because it's an early example of mail from Palestine to Spain. And we have here an postmark of an early postmark of Tel Aviv. And we also have typograph stamps that are on the cover as well. Another cover from Palestine to Spain. Again, these were typograph stamps. Now we have pictorial stamps. It's 1945, and we have the OAT marking of the airmail cover, onward air transmission, going from Palestine through London all the way to Barcelona. And there's censorship on the side. We have the Spanish censorship that looks like it overlays even the censorship in Palestine at the time. And we're in May 1945, so we're close to the war period. The Shetland Islands. Now we have the sorry about that. We have the Shetland Islands here. We have the Shetland Islands on the map. If you're not aware of where the Shetland Islands are. And here is an airmail cover to the Shetland Islands, which are part of Scotland. And again, it's using the all-up airmail rate of 10 mils coming out of Jerusalem at the time. Now, here's a cover, or actually a postcard with a typographical stamp overprinted, paying the printed matter rate rather than the postcard rate. So why is this in the presentation? Because you might think that it was fairly common for mail to transit from Palestine to Italy. However, this postcard is addressed to the Vatican. And if you're not aware, the Vatican city-state was not established until the conclusion of the Lateran Treaty in February of 1929 between the Holy See and Italy. So mail would just typically be addressed to Italy, and that's why you have Italia at the bottom of the postcard. So I thought it was appropriate to put in pre-1929 mail from Palestine to the Vatican, where the Vatican was actually noted as the destination in the circumstances. Palestine to Wales, we have a letter going by airmail to Cardiff in Britain, 40 mils, which was the appropriate airmail rate at the time. And then finally, in Europe, we have a postcard with a typograph stamp, 1925, and a receiving mark for that example in Belgrade, going to the Kingdom of the Serbs, Croats, and Slovenes. A lot of you will know that that refers to the Kingdom of Yugoslavia. However, Yugoslavia's official name change didn't occur until October 3, 1929. So here's an actual cover which shows the earlier name by which the country was known, and that is the reason I put it on in these circumstances. The postal rate is the correct rate for a postcard from Palestine in this circumstance. Now we move to Africa. And here's an example of an old map of Africa. And when I was a kid, I used to love looking at different maps, and in particular, trying to learn all the different countries and all the capitals of the countries. So I'm going to try to take you through a tour of Africa now. First of all, we're going to go to Algeria. And here is a postcard in 1929 going from Jerusalem to Oran in Algeria. It has the printed matter rate rather than the postcard rate, likely because there are very few words on the left-hand side of the card that might justify the printed matter rate. So we have a pictorial stamp in 1929, an early use of the pictorial stamp, given that they came out in 1927. And then we have another cover going by airmail on Alitalia, the Italian airline, to Algeria in North Africa. There's censorship in this case. It is 1939. The war has started. It's October of 1939, and that is the appropriate rate of postage together with the registration of 13 mils. So that's why you see 43 mils of postage on the cover. Next, we go to Basuto Land. And you say, where is Basuto Land? And that's why I've got a map for you. And here's a cover going to Basuto Land. That's current day Lesotho, if you're up on your geography. And it's a registered cover going to Basuto Land in South Africa with 3 pence of registration, 10 pence for airmail. That's why you see the postage that you have. And that kind of postage was in vogue. It could be used in British occupied Palestine at the time, or May 13th, 1945. Palestine to the Belgian Congo, registered postcard. And it has 65 mils of postage. It's 50 plus 8, those are pictorials. And then you've got an imprinted Palestine postcard with 7 mils on it. So we've got the 65 making up 50 mils of the proper airmail rate to the Belgian Congo from Palestine, and we've got 15 mils of paying for the registration service. Next, we go to Eritrea, and you say, where's Eritrea? Well, here we are on the map. If you didn't know where Eritrea was or you forgot, that's where it is. So this is surface mail, this is airmail going from Palestine to Asmara in Eritrea in January of 1948. Next, Palestine to Ethiopia. Just as we had a cover before to Sua Altezza, Benito Mussolini, His Highness Benito Mussolini, here's a cover coming from Jerusalem that's registered going to the King and Emperor of Ethiopia, who is Haile Selassie, although it doesn't say it on the cover. And the cover is sent by airmail, registered, and the rate is 40 mils plus 15 registration, paying the 55. We're in 1944. Next, we go from Palestine to French Cameroons. And there's the French Cameroons near Nigeria, near French Equatorial Africa in Palestine. And here's an example of a cover going from Jericho in 1938 to Cameroon, West Africa. We've got transit markings on the back and a receiving marking in Malameo in May 2, 1938. This is paying the surface rate. So this is just traveling by surface from Palestine across Africa to get to Western Africa. Another example of a cover going by surface mail to the French Cameroons. We've got a receiving marking once again on the back, and we've got pictorial stamps on the front paying the 20 mil surface rate. We had a different surface rate earlier. That was the 15 mil rate, and it got increased to 20. The cover was censored, and again, we have the arrival marking. Next, we have an example of a cover going to AEF, Africa Equatorial Française, French Equatorial Africa, and it's going to Cameroon in these circumstances, 40 mils, and it's routing through different countries. 5 different countries' censorship labels or hand markings are on this cover. So it's a beautiful postal history cover, even though some of you may consider it looks ratty or torn in these situations, but it shows how mail traveled through the Second World War, July 25, 1942, arrives July the 29th. Palestine to Kenya. It was a UK Crown colony and protectorate. It's going by Imperial Airways, soon to become BOAC. It's going in September 1940 from Rishon LeZion, which was near Tel Aviv in Palestine. The mail was actually sent out of Tel Aviv to Mombasa, Kenya, and there's a censorship marking there on the corner. There's Egyptian censorship tape on the left side, remembering once again, we're in wartime. Palestine to Madagascar. You wouldn't necessarily think this was a common location to which mail was sent. Here's an airmail cover. Unfortunately, it was returned to sender. It's got pictorial stamps on it, sent in 1947 to Majunga in Madagascar, and again, went by airmail. Palestine to Mauritius. Not that uncommon a destination because the British had set up camps to move people from Palestine to Mauritius in the 1940s. And the post office box, P.O. Box 1000, was a common post office marking that you become familiar with if you're familiar with mail from Palestine to Mauritius. Here's an example of Jerusalem to Mauritius, surface rate, 1942, transits Cairo, censorship tape on the cover. Another cover going to Mauritius, 1944, paying double the surface rate. So the first one paid 15, and this one actually pays 40, going to Mauritius in this case. Palestine to Morocco, a French protectorate, another beautiful postal history cover with all sorts of beautiful colored postage, pictorial stamps. They couldn't find the person. They returned it to sender. After they couldn't find him, you see the French marking inconnu, showing that it was unknown in this particular case. Not often do we see mail going to Morocco that's registered airmail at this period of time. French West Africa. We've got a series of countries that make up French West Africa, and here's a bit of mail that went there. For example, here's a postcard that goes from Nazareth, from the town of Nazareth in 1935, with a pictorial stamp paying the foreign postcard rate, and it's going to Niger AOF, Africa Occidentale Française, French West Africa. So we're back to the map again, and we're looking for Nigeria. Well, there it is over there. And by the way, if you were looking for Niger, you know, it's over here. So we've got Palestine to Nigeria, surface mail. Here are pictorial stamps, and it went to Calabar, redirected to Opobo in Nigeria. various transit markings and receiving markings, ultimate arrival markings in Nigeria. Another cover to Nigeria, not with typograph stamps, but with pictorial stamps, going to southern Nigeria in 1936. It's the airmail rate, an early airmail cover going to Nigeria from Palestine. Palestine to Nyasaland, which was a UK protectorate. So we have a 1940 cover going by airmail on Alla Littoria, the Italian airline, to Limbe, Nyasaland, with 30 mil of postage. It was marked that it was insufficient for airmail, and therefore it likely went surface, or alternatively, the airline took it on board. For those of you who are not familiar with this, when Italy came into the war in June of 1940, Alla Littoria service from Palestine to Italy and other places en route were terminated. So this is a cover that was supposed to be sent in April of 1940 on Alla Littoria. Portuguese East Africa. How many letters go from Palestine to Portuguese East Africa? Well, here's one, 1939 in September, and this is Mozambique. So how many letters could you say you've seen from Palestine to Mozambique? Well, here's one with pictorial stamps, 25 mil rate, with censor tape over on the side going by airmail. Palestine to Northern Rhodesia, 40 mils in this case, and Northern Rhodesia is now Zambia, and it's February of 1943, so we're in the war. That's why we see the censor tape. We also see the airmail markings, so it went on BOAC, or previously Imperial Airways. We see censorship markings as well down below, and the letter was written in Polish. Southern Rhodesia, a UK crown colony, now Zimbabwe. These pictorial stamps were affixed to this letter going to Salisbury, Rhodesia, registered out of Tel Aviv, goes by airmail, censorship tape on the side, and the rate is the appropriate rate of 40 mils plus 15 to pay the 55 postage. There's 4 times 10 plus 15 that made 55. Then we've got Palestine to St. Helena. How many of you have got a letter from Palestine to St. Helena? Well, here's one, May of 1921. Palestine typograph stamps overprinted going to the island of St. Helena in the South Atlantic. The rate is the appropriate rate, paying the 10 mil foreign letter rate. And when we talk about St. Helena, we're also close to another place, which is called the Ascension Islands. And the Ascension Islands were a crown colony and a dependency of St. Helena. So how many of you have got a cover that has pictorial stamps or typograph stamps or blue stamps to the Ascension Islands in the South Atlantic Ocean, where the address is number 10 Bungalow, Ascension Islands, and there's a receiving cancel on the back. The arrival mark is fairly unclear, but it looks like an arrival cancel. Palestine to Sierra Leone, a UK crown colony and protectorate in these cases. And this was the 7 mil UK surface letter rate, and it's the appropriate rate. It goes to Freetown. Oh, look who it's addressed to, Harry Luke, the English colonial secretary in Sierra Leone. We saw Harry Luke before, we're gonna see Harry Luke again. The only thing we can conclude, either he was a diligent colonial servant who was consistently receiving mail, or he was a stamp collector and people loved to send him letters wherever he went to. We're back to the map of Africa again, and we see Sierra Leone again. And Sierra Leone, for those of you who forget where it is or need to be refreshed, it's over on the West Coast. So here's a double weight airmail cover with pictorial stamps on it going to Freetown in Sierra Leone. The previous cover had a typograph stamp. Here are the pictorial stamps. 1938 arrival, went on KLM, the Dutch Airlines. in these particular circumstances, not Imperial Airways, not Alitalia. And finally, we see a pictorial cover going to Sierra Leone. The rate has changed. There's still Palestine censorship. This is December of 1939 because we're still in wartime. Palestine to the Sudan. Sudan, fairly close to Palestine. This is an airmail cover, or appears to be an airmail cover, because the postage that was affixed was the all-up airmail empire rate, that I referred to earlier in the presentation when we looked at an Aden cover. And this is June of 1939, going out of Haifa to Khartoum, Sudan. Here's another cover going from Palestine to Sudan. The airmail rate is much higher. Remember, there it was 10. Then it went up to 60 when the war was on. This is 1941, going to Atabara in the Sudan, going to Sudan Railways. Palestine to Tanganyika, 40 mil rate, censored airmail on the left side, airmail cover going to Dar es Salaam in Tanganyika. And Tanganyika, now known to all of us as Tanzania or Tanzania. Next, Tripolitania, now, or at least referred to, ultimately part of Italy. Tripolitania was a former Italian colony. This is February of 1945, addressed to somebody in the Middle East forces coming out of a post office in Palestine. FPO 155 was in Palestine from 1941 to early 1945. Palestine to Tunisia, 1919, typograph stamps, not overprinted, various transit marks through Egypt, going and being received down below in Tunisia. And there's EPC on a cover, Egyptian postal censors. You'll see the EPC on various covers, 1918, 1919, 1920, in that period of time. A beautiful cover, Palestine to Tunisia, that never gets to the addressee. It goes between, because the Germans were controlling the Mediterranean at the time, the letter wasn't sent to Tunis. It was sent to Tangiers, where there was a British post office. Ultimately, the addressee couldn't be located, so the letter was returned to Jerusalem and then in Tel Aviv almost 2 years later. Palestine to Tunisia, but look at the stamp sent by the Consul General of France in Jerusalem, a stamp that was used for very limited purposes in May of 1948, addressed to Tunis. Palestine to Uganda, a UK crown colony, going to that place we know very well, Entebbe, associated with Idi Amin much later, goes by Imperial Airways, so an early airmail cover from 1935 that goes from Palestine to Uganda. Palestine to Zanzibar, now known as Tanzania or Tanzania, and there's Zanzibar. How many covers do you know of that went from Palestine to Zanzibar? Now we leave Africa and we go to the West Indies. And I thought I would give you a colorful picture with pirates and parrots and ships and galleons and modern boats and all sorts of islands. So here we have Palestine to the Bahamas, to the Royal Bank of Canada. Beautiful double weight cover, registered with heavy postage because we're in World War II, and it's going by Pacific Clipper. So for those of you who are airmail collectors, you will know that the mail went all around the world, from Palestine through Australia or through the Far East, all the way to the United States, across the United States, and over to the Caribbean or to England, as the case may be. Palestine to Barbados, another UK colony, and this is 40 mils. It's going going air part of the way, and then it's going by surface. The mail was censored, and look what happened. It's addressed to Barbados, but it's missent to the Bahamas. So it just takes longer for it to get to its ultimate destination. Palestine to Barbados once again, and we've got different postage. Here we've got pictorial stamps with 40 mils. Here we've got much heavier postage because the rate was increased to 190 mils, And we've got this mail going in 1945 from Tel Aviv to Hastings, Barbados in the British West Indies. Palestine to Cuba. Look at how much postage there is. 315 mils going by airmail registered. So it's double the weight going from Palestine, Tel Aviv to Havana, Cuba. Palestine to Curacao, which was the Dutch colony in the Dutch West Indies. And you see 5 times weight, very heavy postage, including registration, 640 mils going from Haifa to a bank in Willemstad, Curacao. So real commercial mail, censorship label over on the side. Palestine to the Dominican Republic in the Caribbean. And what's interesting is there was a Jewish immigrant settlement in Sosua in Puerto Plata in the Dominican Republic. And then right next door to the Dominican Republic is Haiti. And here's a cover from Jerusalem to Port-au-Prince, Haiti, 75 mils going by airmail in 1947. Palestine to Jamaica, to Barclays Bank, commercial mail, censored, registered, coming from Jerusalem. And this is mail that went in 1940 when the Mediterranean was closed. So it had to go by airmail through that Pacific Clipper route. And that's why you see so much postage on the cover. Palestine to St. Kitts, the British West Indies. This is surface mail, again, going to a bank, Barclays Bank in Palestine, 15 mil surface rate. Palestine to St. Lucia, another island in the British West Indies. Castries, registered cover, heavy postage. In this particular case, double weight registered, 265 mils. So a feature of what you're seeing is when mail had to travel on the Pacific Clipper route because of closures of airmail routes to various destinations, the postage increased to pay for the lengthier journey that the mail had to travel. Palestine to St. Thomas in the U.S. Virgin Islands. And here's a cover, 150 mils, November 1945 from Jerusalem. Palestine to Trinidad. There was an internment camp where Jews were located in Port of Spain and Trinidad, registered airmail cover. This is one of the few covers that went from Palestine to Trinidad in this period of time at this particular rate. Now we're into South America. And here's a very interesting cover for you. You see a cover going from Jaffa with typograph stamps, postmarked in Jaffa, and look where you think it's going. It looks like it's going to Providence, Rhode Island, Providence, RI. Now there's no reference to USA on the cover. And look where it ends up, in Buenos Aires in 1924. How did it get to Buenos Aires? And when I saw the cover, all I could do is speculate that the person who was handling the mail when the mail was leaving Palestine thought that this cover was going to RA, to the Republic of Argentina. And therefore, that's why you've got the arrival markings on the back in Buenos Aires. It's the only thing I can think of. And what's notable to me is the cover was not returned to sender. So it ended up somewhere, and I have it now. So obviously it survived all these years wherever it landed in Argentina. Palestine to Bolivia. We've got a 1939 cover, censored December of 1939. Fairly uncommon to see mail going to Bolivia. Palestine to British Guiana, 1918. And this is a typograph stamp that has an army postmark. We're November of 1918. And there's an arrival postmark in Georgetown, British Guiana, out of Jerusalem. So very uncommon to see a piece going from Palestine to British Guiana with typograph stamps that early on. Here's a later piece going from Palestine to Georgetown in British Guiana, double weight airmail. That's 1942. Nice cover nonetheless. 2 different censors open the cover, and it's heavier postage, 300 mils I said 150 times 2, so it's double weight because of the distance it was going. And you'll notice at the top, it's written in English and Jewish. Jewish, I'm assuming, is referring to Yiddish. Palestine to Chile. And here's a cover that's going on December 17th, 1917, out of an Army post office, SZ44. This was the earliest recorded free mail out of Jerusalem. For a 2-month period, the British allowed mail to be sent, 2 to 3 months, allowed to be sent out of Palestine by civilians free of postage. So instead of having a blue stamp on it, which wasn't created until February of 1918, prior to that time, civilians could send mail out. And so a letter actually went from Jerusalem, which was SZ44, to Santiago, Chile, free of postage. Palestine to Colombia. Again, an unusual destination, goes from Jaffa to Caldas, Colombia, going by surface mail from the UK or Europe. It likely did travel on imperial air some of the way. You see that the airmail etiquette has 2 lines stroked through, so it's likely a jusqua marking, jusqua meaning until a certain point, and then it went by surface. Palestine to Ecuador. So here is a cover with fairly heavy postage, 115 mils, going by airmail to Quito, Ecuador. And that would have gone by airmail on BOAC, the successor to Imperial Airways, across Africa, and likely by Pan American Airways all the way to Miami and then down into South America. So a 1945 cover with censorship. Palestine to Paraguay, registered mail. Very unusual to see a cover going to Paraguay, let alone a registered cover. This cover went to 1937, transited various places, and took 14 days to get there. So remarkable in the circumstances. Palestine to Peru, another uncommon destination. Censorship markings on the left, registered out of Tel Aviv. Lots of postage because it was a heavier letter. So it was double the normal rate and therefore double the normal weight that occupied that letter. Palestine to Suriname, Dutch Guiana, the Dutch colony, Suriname, also known as. So here we go, 165 mils, 150 plus 15, with different censorship markings, different transit markings, and arrival back stamp on the back in Paramaribo in Suriname. A second cover going to Paramaribo in Suriname, and I put this one in, aside from the fact you've also got pictorial stamps on it. It's going out of Haifa, but then you see the Suriname censorship and you see the Palestine censorship on the cover. We're still in World War II, April 1945. Palestine to Uruguay, going to Montevideo, fairly heavy postage in this case, and it took 34 days to get there. We're in the middle of the war. It's 1942. It traveled by airmail, but would have had a long route. Palestine to Venezuela, to Maracaibo in Venezuela, 150 mils plus 15 registration. Now we're into Central America. First, we'll go to the Canal Zone, and because we've got this area over on the left to cover. Canal Zone, here's Palestine to Gatun in the Canal Zone in Central America, pays the appropriate rate, and you see that it's going by alla Littoria because we're in December 1939 before Italy is involved in the war. Palestine to Costa Rica, this is going by surface mail. It's registered, and what's interesting, it's going to Sir Don Gamliel Noriega, Consul General of Colombia, who's situate in Costa Rica, coming out of Bethlehem in Palestine, various transit markings going through New York and other places. Palestine to El Salvador, going to San Salvador and going through Texas, Miami, and the rate being 125 plus 15 for registration. So the postage marked by pictorial stamps is 140. Palestine to the Republic of Panama, a postcard, proper postcard rate with a pictorial stamp, leaving Jerusalem and being received in Cologne, Panama, in the Republic of Panama, about 15 days later. Palestine to the Republic of Panama letter. This is an airmail letter registered. I put it in because you've got some very interesting markings and censorship on the cover, but particularly you see this arrow marking with the notation upside down. In French, it says transportation by plane took place. And the reason why that's very interesting is the airmail etiquette is marked out. And as a result, you wouldn't have thought that the cover would have actually gone by plane, particularly because the postage is really surface mail kinds of postage. Now we get to Asia. Palestine to Afghanistan to Kandahar, registered cover 1947. Unusual to see Palestine hasn't had relations, Pakistan hasn't had relations with Israel. This is just before the establishment of the State of Israel. Pakistan came into existence shortly before that time or around that time. So it's just interesting to see this cover. Palestine to Burma, which was a UK Crown colony, a first flight cover going from Gaza to Akyab, pictorial stamps on it, 1933, with a receiving mark in Akyab. Palestine to Ceylon, a UK Crown colony going to Slave Island in Colombo, Ceylon, with a censorship marking. The stamp here is one of the blues. So it's one of the first markings, March 6, 1918, coming out of Jerusalem. A later cover from Palestine to Ceylon with pictorial stamps, with a receiving marking in Colombo in Ceylon. And there's the Tel Aviv postmark on the stamp, written in German, opened by the censor. Also interesting because it has a Karachi transit marking on the airmail etiquette. Now we're in China, Palestine to China, Jerusalem to Shanghai, with a typograph stamp on it and transit marking through Port Said. Palestine to China #2, beautiful pictorial stamps, heavy postage, and going to Beijing, to Peiping in China. Then we've got Palestine to French Indochina, going to Saigon. And unfortunately, it was returned to sender because there was no service going to French Indochina at the time. We're in 1940, so we're right in the middle of the war when the Japanese have conquered some of the surrounding areas. The letter was censored, and you see that it was sent by airmail out of the King David Hotel in Jerusalem. Palestine to Hong Kong, 1920 or 1919, with typograph stamps, not overprinted as yet, various transit markings and various censorship aspects to this cover. Hong Kong cover #2, Jerusalem to Hong Kong. 2 piastre postage, it's a typograph stamp on the cover, transit through Port Said in Egypt, and a receiving mark in Hong Kong on arrival. Hong Kong cover #3, Palestine to Hong Kong from Tel Aviv, on the back actually, mailed in Jaffa, registered in Jaffa. This is a registered entire paying the registration fee, and this is the 15 mil paying the surface rate. And a beautiful cover, Palestine to Hong Kong #4, in the midst of World War II, censorship on the cover, undelivered for the reasons stated on the cover because postal communication was suspended. Postage was much heavier, registered out of Haifa, and this cover sent on November 23, 1941, likely landed at the time that the Japanese were taking control of Hong Kong, and therefore that's why communications were suspended. Palestine to India, an early airmail cover that was printed matter, going to India with typograph stamps that are overprinted and receiving marks in the corner. Palestine to Korea. And remember, at the time, Korea was annexed and ruled by Japan. So you see some markings on the cover going through Hong Kong, going through Egypt, through Point Said. You've got typograph stamps on the cover, and it's printed matter. The next cover going from Palestine to Korea actually has Japanese markings on the cover. It goes from Jaffa to Korea, registered cover. And so it looks like you've got an arrival marking in 1925. And these are the typograph stamps paying the registration fee of 13 and the surface rate of 13. Palestine to Siam and Thailand, going to Bangkok, 1940, in the middle of the war, goes through censorship, it can travel by airmail in this particular case. That's why you see the amount of postage on it. Palestine to Turkey, and you're saying, why am I doing Turkey here? Why didn't I do it in Asia? It depends on whether or not you consider Turkey part of Asia or part of Europe. I put Turkey in here because this is a cover going to the Princess Islands in Turkey, which was off the coast of Istanbul, an early cover to Turkey because this is after the dissolution of the Ottoman Empire. You've got typograph stamps on the cover that are paying the foreign surface rate. Palestine to the USSR, registered cover to Moscow out of Tel Aviv. And what's notable about this cover is you have pictorial stamps and you have typograph overprinted stamps. We call this mixed franking. Collectors like to look for this, together with the fact that the postal rates are quite interesting. It's a double weight registered surface mail letter. Finally, we get to Oceania or Oceania. First, we go to Australia. Australia in 1918 was a jurisdiction, was a country where mail was sent because there were lots of soldiers serving from Australia and New Zealand in the First World War in the Egyptian Expeditionary Forces. This is a heavyweight letter, double weight registered, coming out of Jaffa, typograph stamps with Army Field Post Offices on it. So I thought I would put this in because you often don't see such heavy mail going to Australia. Dutch East Indies, Palestine to Java in the Dutch East Indies, 1923 went by surface mail, censorship markings on the cover, and a receiving marking in Velter-Verden in the Dutch East Indies. So these are the typograph stamps. Then we got pictorial stamps. It's Palestine to Java, to Batavia in Java. It's going in 1933, an early airmail cover going on KLM, because KLM, as being a Dutch airline, serviced the Dutch East Indies. Palestine to Fiji, we see Sir Harry Luke here on the cover. And it's a surface mail cover going from Jerusalem to Suva in Fiji with transits through Egypt. It looks like it might be a government-to-government correspondence because you see a crown on it. Palestine to the Federated Malay States, right here in Asia. So we've got the blues on a registered cover going to the Federated Malay States in November of 1918, various transit markings and arrival markings. Palestine to the Malayan Union. So the Malayan Federated States became the Malayan Union with some changes. And in 1946 or 47, here's a registered cover to the Malayan Union out of Palestine, airmail going to Ipoh, Perak in the Malayan Union. Singapore, Palestine to the Strait Settlements. Here's a first flights cover in 1933, going from Palestine to Singapore. 1948, 1947, I really like this cover. Hard to find a cover from commercial mail from Palestine to Malaya, to the island of Penang. They couldn't find the addressee, so it went to the dead letter office, Bombay, Madras in India. First flight cover, Palestine to Singapore, all up rate 1938. We have the Marshall Islands under US control, a 1948 cover with a Jewish National Fund overprinted stamp, mandate stamps in May of 1948, just before the State of Israel was declared. about 10 days later. Palestine to New Zealand, typograph stamps going to the South Island, Dunedin. Palestine pictorial stamps, registered cover going to Hastings, New Zealand. Quintuple rate going from the winery in Rishon LeZion to New Zealand. And finally, our plane lands in this presentation in Tahiti. And it's a registered surface mail cover with various transit markings going through San Francisco and New York from Palestine to Papeete in Tahiti. And that is the end of my formal presentation. Thank you.
What a whirlwind adventure you've taken us on. That was so much fun. That really, really was a remarkable postal history presentation. Thank you so much, Ed.
My pleasure.
It was phenomenal. We will open up the floor for Q&A, friends. We know that this was a 90-minute presentation, but if you'd like to continue, we're going to throw some of the questions to Mr. Kroft. We'll start with the very first question, which was launched 90 minutes ago with when you were dedicated on your first screen, your first slide. So what does ZL refer to for Dr. Lesbard?
They are two letters that refer in Hebrew to may his memory be for a blessing. It's common when Jewish people pass away that after the name of the person, you might put ZL to indicate that the person has passed away, and it stands for the words, may his memory be for a blessing.
See, all I could say during this whole presentation, Ed, was stamps teach. Unbelievable. Here's the next question. In Central America, no covers from Palestine to Guatemala, Honduras, British Honduras, also known as Belize or Nicaragua. I have seen some from Palestine to Honduras from the 1920s and 1930s.
And the answer is, if you've got them, contact me. I'd love to see them and I'd love to acquire them.
Fabulous. And the questioner, you have my contact information. Send me an email and I will get you in touch with Mr. Kroft. Excuse me. How long did it take for you to acquire Palestine mail to all of these destinations?
20 years and counting.
It's a fascinating story unto itself, I'm sure. On the Mussolini cover, why are the stamps marked by red and blue crayon?
I'd have to go back to the cover to look at it, but likely because we're talking about the fact that it's a registered cover. So if I put it up on the screen again, just looking for it quickly, yeah, that the marking looks like it's first of all, the cross is typical on a cover that has registration on it. And it might be that the stamps equally were marked with crayon by the postal authorities for the same reason, but it wouldn't necessarily be common that those stamps would be marked with the crayon in addition to the cover.
I'm just staring at the piece myself right now, friends. It's a fascinating cover. And as one of our attendees said, it's a great program for those interested in world geography. Thank you for putting this together.
You're very welcome.
And this question, Ed, and for right now, it's our last question. Why no JNF labels?
The JNF label was on the Marshall Island cover in 1948. The JNF labels were usually used for actual postage on covers in a very short period of time in May of 1948, the first 2 weeks of May. They weren't supposed to be used on mail going to foreign destinations, so that's why you wouldn't typically see them.
Thank you. And a couple more questions came in. The Korean printed matter cover has rare 1 mils stamps.
And my friend Don Chaffetz wrote that, and he should know because he's Mr. Printed Matter in the Holy Land area. So I'm just finding it for anyone who I can find it quickly in Asia.
Sure.
But, yeah. And did he say it was the printed matter cover?
Printed matter cover, yes.
Yeah. So Don is saying that to see the 1 mil stamp on that cover is very unusual. And I would concur with Don. It's not often that you do see the 1 mils, but thank you, Don, for pointing that out to everybody.
Truly. Thank you. Sorry, I missed the beginning. Are all these amazing covers commercial?
And the answer is there are some. I would say most of them are. You know, here's an example of a cover, just because we have it on the screen, the Korea cover, which is from the Orient Stamp Company in Tel Aviv. The fact that it was sent to the Mikado in Korea as printed matter, there might have been some philatelic literature in it or a purchase and sale order. It would still mean that it's commercial, even though it was sent by a stamp dealer. But I would say 95% of the covers in this presentation are truly commercial and not philatelic.
What was the yellow stamp that had the words in Hebrew, Palestine, Aleph, Yud?
The typograph stamps that are found in the 1920, the overprinted typograph stamps in the period 1920 to 1927 would be those kinds of stamps. Here's an example on the Spain cover. And, oops, I just lost that. Hello?
Yeah, we're here.
Are we here? Yeah,
Yes.
I think I lost my PowerPoint presentation. There we go. But for whatever it's worth, the letters stand for Eretz Yisrael, Aleph Yud, or the Eretz is the Hebrew for the Aleph, which means land of, and the Yud stands for Israel, which means, so it stands for land of Israel.
I have a question. What was it on the Columbia cover? It was curious, the grapefruit and orange, like what does that mean? Did it come with fruit or like, what does that mean?
No, the Jaffa was a location where they would grow grapefruits and oranges and other citrus. And so what would happen is you would have, they had a special postmark out of Jaffa promoting the of grapefruits. So that was a special postmark that was there. Okay.
All right. I wondered about that. And then what was up with Henry Luke?
No idea, but it just so happened over the years, I acquired covers independently. They weren't part of a lot. 3 different sources, all of which were addressed to Henry Luke when he was in 3 different locations in the British Empire.
What are the odds?
So that's what made me curious. What are the odds? And that's what made me curious.
Wild. And then I have to, the Rhode Island, that was crazy.
That was great. That was a crazy one.
Okay, and then we'll take 2 more questions, friends. Thanks, Ed, for hanging out with us. What would you say is roughly the split among Arab senders, Jewish senders, Holy Land tourist covers, and others?
That's a very good question. You know, some of it is random. You had some covers that were clearly sent by people who were sending in Arabic. They were marked as being sent in Arabic. You would see Arabic writing on them. You would see a lot of Christian pilgrims, you know, going to Palestine, sending mail to their relatives, particularly out of Bethlehem, Nazareth, so out of Jerusalem. So that was not uncommon. That was fairly common to see. So the mix is all over the place. That's what I would say.
Do you have many covers sent to worldwide destinations with the Jaffa orange postmark?
Harris, I don't know the answer to that offhand. I haven't studied them, so I can't tell you.
And I have a couple of crash covers from Imperial Airlines that were mailed from Palestine. Are these rare? One is the Brindisi crash, and the other is the Crete crash.
There are various crash covers that you're referring to, Neil, are in 1937. Some of those crashes that you're talking about. Mail from those crashes do exist. People do collect crash covers from that period. They're not, I wouldn't say they're common, because there were only so many letters on the plane and so many letters that were recovered.
And our last question, friends, for the evening is, all covers are in great condition. Do you send covers for repair?
I do not.
I
do not.
They are the real deal. Well, I got to tell you, this was a fascinating talk. And I'd love for you to please look at the chat box so you can get your accolades, your due accolades. Friends, thanks so much for joining us. And Ed, what an epic journey you took us on. Thank you. Really, really, what a time travel.
Thank you.
This is just the type of presentation, friends, that I hope that if you have friends who are teachers, history buffs, share with your synagogues, your temples, your religious education, World War II buffs. It really spans so many interests, and is an excellent door to the hobby, as Scott English likes to refer to these types of topics. So we trust that you'll do a great thing. You'll do a mitzvah, and you'll share this presentation. Thank you, Ed. Thanks everyone Heidi, for joining us tonight. And Stamp Chat is a production of the APS. The American Philatelic Society is 28,000 members strong. The American Philatelist, the monthly magazine published by the APS, is proud to say that our feature articles are written by members. The AP is currently soliciting writers for upcoming issues. Topics include airmail, the USPS, philatelic libraries, estate planning, or postal history. If you or someone you know would be interested in submitting an article, please send an email to aparticle@stamps.org. That's aparticle@stamps.org. Looking for presentation ideas for your online Stamp Club meetings? Check out and subscribe to the APS YouTube channel, where you will find hundreds of fabulous presentations just like Mr. Kroft's to choose from. Until next time, connect and collect. Find us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and of course on stamps.org. The American Philatelic Society, social since 1886. Thanks, everybody. Thanks so much, Ed. Good night, everyone.
Thanks, Heidi. Yeah, good night, everyone. Thank you.